Again, this is our weekly get-together with the press, and I'm going to kick it off. And the first thing I'd say is, much to my dismay, it's now week 4 in the legislature, and we're still just talking about judiciary bills in the Senate. And these are all the judiciary bills that came out of the Oversight Committee that is not addressing any of the priorities that we came here to address. Montanans sent us here to address things like property tax and housing affordability and affordability in general, and that's not what we're doing in the Montana State Senate now. I'm hoping that's going to change, but I'm not seeing it on today's agenda. If you look at today's agenda, most of it's dominated once again by Senate judiciary bills, many of those that came out of the Select Committee on Judicial Oversight, which had a predisposed conclusion, which was to undermine the judiciary. And sure enough, that's what they're doing with these bills, or attempting to do, and we'll continue to try and fight that. People, when I was knocking on doors, there wasn't a single person that said, geez, I hope you'll rein in that judiciary. That's the number one problem for us. There was no discussion of it. And you talk to any of our candidates, none of them heard that at the door. Yet that's what we're putting our time into, and it's really time misspent. And I hope we get reoriented here soon. You know, for our part, we're going to continue to stand up for the fundamental issues that Montanans sent us here for, and that's to address their priorities. And we hope that we're going to make some headway. We're going to hear some housing affordability discussion today, and that's where we think we ought to be putting our time. So thank you.
All right. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Always appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. Last week we saw some great statewide support for continuing Medicaid in Montana. As we all know, it works for many Montanans, students, single parents, long-term disabilities. And it is our belief that if you need to go to the doctor, you should be able to. So that was very good hearings. We also had 2 big tax bills, down tax bills, come out last week that received hearings, HB 154 and 155. There are a lot of tax bills moving right now. This is very good. We want to have lots of good discussion about tax and have a final product that comes out that actually provides long-term relief for working and middle-class Montanans. We will be ready and continue to negotiate the best deal we can that provides the most relief to everyday Montanans. 2 of our priority platform bills passed the House last week as well, HJ1 and HB 83 by Rep. Running Wolf. Very important requests from Indian country to keep tribal communities safe. And this week we're announcing the introduction of our priority housing affordability legislation, which is what we'll talk about today. We need to give families room to grow, older folks the freedom to choose the right place to live for retirement, and housing costs are still out of control. Inventory is still a problem. And while the governor did declare victory, you know, through the Montana miracle from last session, more Montanans are still sleeping in their cars. So we don't have this problem solved by any means. We need to continue working on it. We're stepping up with bills to make it easier for people to find housing they can afford. Senator Fern from Whitefish is bringing a bill to add $50 million to the Cole Multifamily Housing Trust Fund. Cole Multifamily Housing Trust Fund to expand housing opportunities. We have legislation to prevent homelessness by investing in prevention, funding rapid rehousing and rental assistance, and supporting emergency shelters. The best way to prevent homelessness is to keep Montanans in a safe, stable home of their choosing. And so we have some of our bill sponsors here today for housing that can, I think, go ahead and have a quick statement, is that right, on each of their housing priorities, and then we'll get to questions after that.
Oh, I start,
Susan.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, my motto has always been, what's good for Native Americans is good for Montana. But I have 2 bills that are coming up that deal with housing and access to housing. One of them is LC 523 and the other one is SB 219, which are companion bills that attempt to address concerns that I have on for two underserved groups, the Native American and the veterans. LC 523 is basically a study bill, asking for an interim study bill on the barriers to mortgages for Native Americans on and off the reservation. There's still a discrepancy off reservation as well as on reservations. So that study bill will look at home ownership and how these groups of people can, get the American dream. Home ownership is the American dream. This interim study will examine barriers to Native American home ownership as well as for our veterans, because we have a lot of Native American veterans as well. Native Americans serve at a greater rate than any other group of people in the United States. So we have lots of Native American veterans. SB 219 is to require a tribal member and a veteran on the Board of Housing representation, so that they do have a voice on the Board of Housing. The Board of Housing provides rental assistance and home ownership programs, but these two typical low income groups don't seem to be able to access it, and I'm hoping that these two positions will help, at least even spreading it out to the community, and that they can look at the Board of Housing when they try to get affordable and safe housing. So those are my two bills, and that's it.
All right, I can touch on a couple of the housing bills that I've been working on and have introduced. One of them is for a mobile home dispute park resolution program. Folks that covered the Capitol last session, I'm sure remember House Bill 889, and that was a bill that we brought to provide more rights for Montanans living in mobile home parks. Because, I can say from even just talking to folks in my district, but then increasingly hearing from people in mobile home parks across the state, they're facing predatory practices, skyrocketing lot rents, a real lack of maintenance that even creates health and safety impediments. And so what we tried to do last session was actually change the Mobile Home Lot Rental Act to give those folks more rights. The governor vetoed it and said that the current law provides, and I'll quote his veto letter here, a balance between responsibilities and the duties of landlords and mobile homeowners. So since it seems like folks, or at least the governor, thinks that current law is sufficient, what this program would do is enforce the current law and provide a way for both residents and landlords to seek relief and remedy without having to end up in the courtroom. So for example, if a resident feels that the park owner is not adequately maintaining the park, they could file a complaint, the state would investigate, and then if needed, fines would be levied, corrective action would be prescribed. And so this is something that I've actually heard from numerous residents who have seen in other states where this has worked, who they're saying, they see that their rights are being violated, but they can't afford an attorney. And park owners have attorneys on retainer. So the idea here is that we can level the playing field and at least make sure that current law is being upheld. In this bill, we also give residents first right of refusal to purchase their parks. Folks have seen, I'm sure, from across the state, private equity firms are buying parks, and quite literally from underneath the feet of Montanans. And I think that we need to remember here, our constituents are homeowners. Folks that live in manufactured home parks, they own their home, and a lot of them have invested their life savings in that home. And so what this bill would do is balance the rights, two private property rights, the rights of the homeowner and the rights of the park owner, so that if their park is being sold, they're notified, and then if they want to purchase the park, they can, or not the park, actually purchase the park, they can go ahead and do that. And so that's one bill that is likely going to be heard next Thursday. Also have a bill about protecting and providing a little bit more transparency around security deposits. My district has a lot of folks living in apartments that are managed by corporate property management companies. One of the things that we have in law currently is that when you're leaving, the property manager does an inspection. And then you have 24 hours to go back in and do any corrective action, so cleaning, for example. But what now we're seeing is that if residents, if my constituents want to exercise what's in law, they're 24 hours to go back in and take corrective action, they're being charged a fee to do that. Sometimes a fee that's upward of $50 or $75. So they're essentially being punished to exercise what their current right is. And on top of this, they're seeing huge portions of their security deposits taken out for very nebulous reasons. And so what this would do is it would increase the amount of time residents have from 24 to 48 hours. It would also require that property managers can't charge a fee for residents going in and doing whatever additional work or cleaning is required. And then the property manager would have to itemize what's coming out of their security deposit. And the idea here is to provide a little bit of transparency so that we don't see folks being taken advantage of. We also have a bill that incentivizes landlords for renting below market value, because what we often hear about is you've got a lot, especially mom and pop landlords, who they want to be keeping housing affordable for their residents. And so what this bill would do is just provide a tax incentive for them to do just that.
Thanks. I'll go next. I have an exciting bill called House Bill 311. It's to refund rental application fees to folks who do not get the apartment. This will solve two major problems. First, it will stop the predatory out-of-state corporate landlords that have swooped in the last 5 years and are making quite a bit of money on listing a place and then not returning, say you have 50 applicants, 40. They choose the second one. Those 48 other people don't get their $50 or $75 back. And you multiply that up looking for multiple places, and that's a month's rent. The second thing it does is it ends what I'm starting to call the housing lottery, and that is, how often do you pay money for a service that you don't receive? That's not paying for a service, that's a lottery. So people that don't get the apartment are currently subsidizing the people that do, and that is unfair to all those folks that are just trying to find a place to live. In Bozeman, we did have, at the beginning of the pandemic, a instance of a corporate landlord listing a place, unlisting it, listing it again, and harvesting those application fees without ever providing a single person a place to live. So I'm pretty excited that we can get some pretty good bipartisan consumer protection legislation. I believe I have 8 Republican co-sponsors, and they all identify the problem in their own district and know it's an issue. So I'm really excited to see this advance.
Okay. Any questions?
For Jonathan, with the mobile home park dispute resolution or investigation bill, who would be doing those investigations?
So the Department of Commerce, since they already have Board of Housing and other housing programs, it would be housed within Commerce.
Yeah. Do they already do anything like that for other programs, or would that be kind of a new function for them?
That would be a new function for them, as far as I'm
Do
aware.
they want to do that?
I've made them aware of it, and they stay neutral on these types of things, but they're aware of it, and there are models in other states for them to use.
Pat, last summer you and I were talking about why Democrats are choosing not to participate in that Senate Select Committee on judicial stuff. Part of that was that you thought the legislature was actually a better place to kind of debate the merits of those bills rather than in this, like you had said, predisposed committee. And I guess I'm wondering, do you feel like now that 8 months was put into that committee, are you guys kind of trying to play catch up, not just in your arguments in debating these bills on the floor, but also kind of unwinding some of the persuasion these Republicans have for these judicial reform bills?
I don't think we're playing catch up at all. We weren't just going fishing this summer. When these committee meetings were going on, we were meeting. We had a subcommittee that met regularly. We were aware of what was coming. We were preparing our response to that, and I think you're seeing some of that in our response in these bills in committee. And we have had some success in defeating some of those bills. One of those was on the floor last week in the Senate, and it went down on a 50-50 tie. I think the House has also defeated one.
It came
It
back.
came back,
We
okay.
brought it back from the dead.
Okay. In any case, I think we're well prepared, and I think our defense is apparent in committee, and hopefully will deliver on the floor as well.
Hey, Pat, I'm a little curious in the Senate. I mean, we're 17 days in right now. We're sort of approaching transmittal. It'll be here before we know it. And I'm wondering if you're, at all concerned about the prospects of getting the members' bills, heard and passed by the transmittal deadline. I mean, have we run through enough time with very low production in the Senate that you start worrying about non-revenue bills not crossing over to the House?
Absolutely. I'm concerned just about the general progress we've made in the Senate, period. I mean, I'm also concerned about the budget. I mean, that is our number one job when we come here, is to pass a balanced budget. And we're at least a week behind on that budget work. And I'm not quite sure what the plan is for making that up. I just see us spinning our wheels and not doing the people's business that we were elected to do. And that's not only, we're not the only ones that bring good bills. Our friends across the aisle also bring some good bills. And so those bills that are going to miss transmittal are not only Democrat bills, but there are some, maybe some good Republican bills as well.
Right. It kind of goes without saying,
Yeah.
but we just haven't seen any hearings,
Yeah.
thus far. And when you say you're a week behind on the budget, what's your benchmark there? I mean, why not 2 weeks?
Well, I'm just looking at the original schedule and looking how that schedule shifted, and it looked like it shifted about a week from the original schedule.
All right. When do we hit the point in a return? I mean, look at the number of days between now and the end of February. When you say, okay, there's literally not enough time left for hearings to sort of get the non-revenue membership heard before transmittal.
Could you restate that?
Okay. So, all right, this is lousy journalist math. But, if you sort of look at the bills that remain to be heard, non-revenue bills, right? So that's, we're looking at the Buffalo jump there. And, at what point in time, when do we cross the point where you look at it and just say, there's just not enough hours in the day, hours in the week to accommodate, hearings for what hasn't been heard?
Yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint a time or a threshold there. I think you're going to eventually hope that we'll start seeing some longer days in committee. We're going to start seeing some longer days on the floor,
Right.
To move some of these bills across. If not, yeah, they will just fall off the map and we'll never address it. I'm hoping that we're ready to go to work. I'm hoping that the President and the rest of the Senate is willing to ramp up the process so we get to address all the worthy bills that legislators have introduced and are having drafted.
I'm wondering if you would consider Senate Bill 90 a little bit more worthy now. It was wildly unpopular initially and then amended, and it looks like it got through committee with bipartisan support. And I'm wondering if the changes have more Democrats supporting it.
Good question. As I understand it, I'm not on that committee, but as I understand it, they've now focused the kind of the tax refund piece directly on just the general fund component. And I think that certainly does make it more potentially something that Democrats would consider as worthy. I have not seen a fiscal note, and I would like to see the fiscal note on it. How much money would not be in the general fund? We also have a bunch of programs in the state that are really important to Montanans, and we want to make sure we're not shorting those. So I'd have to see the numbers before I could be more definitive.
May I sit on that committee? I sit on local government. I'm the vice chair for local government, and it was amended, but no fiscal note came, and that was our issue with that. No adjusted fiscal note came with it, and it was the contention of everybody that it will catch up, but I really hesitate to pass a bill that has not an updated fiscal note with it. I mean, it's just, you just have to do it. This catching up probably won't happen until it gets to the House, or if it gets to the House. So I was one of the no votes to that bill.
I have a question since we cracked open the budget discussion, and I realize it's still early in the day, but have you guys gotten any guidance on Trump's memo on funding? I know you already put out a statement, Katie, but any additional guidance, and does this, where are you all at with that? How are you feeling about that aspect?
So I'm pretty hot about it, because what I'm hearing from people that in my delegation that are hearing from their constituents is that people feel very nervous and scared and uncertain. And so that's what our problem is. We have no information. We don't know. I have nothing. I have received nothing. I have received no comment from any of our federal delegation. I haven't received guidance from the governor's office, but I've asked about it, and I think that it's scaring people, and we need answers right now. It's not okay to let this languish and have people continue to be concerned if they're going to have a job tomorrow, or if they're going to have a federally funded project tomorrow, or if their kid's going to receive certain healthcare services tomorrow. And so I'm pretty upset, and I'm concerned. I have no information. Yeah.
Do you think that some of the spending that's paused needs to be examined and perhaps rolled back as the feds try to get their budget balanced? Close to being balanced,
I'm
perhaps?
sorry, are you?
Oh, sorry. Do you think that the incoming administration's interest in reviewing that spending to determine which of that spending is actually necessary or potentially cut, do you think that's a well-placed priority?
Well, I mean, they can review whatever they need to. I don't know how, I'm a state legislator, but what I do know is the way they've presented it and how they've done it overnight is making Montanans afraid. And that's all I mean, do it in a way that doesn't scare people. I don't know.
Senator Weber, going off that, I was just wondering, have you heard from your constituents about that, with the grant funding being paused? Because I know, can you speak to how the tribal programs may be affected by that?
Thank you for that question. The tribal programs will really be affected with that, especially when a lot of our economy is federally funded. And so right now, I have a meeting at 11:30. Just because of that. The National Congress of American Indians, they're galvanizing themselves to address these issues. So it's not only just the local level, our tribes, but it's also on a national level that the tribes are coming together and gonna try to address this because, like I said, our economies are largely based on federal funding.
And a couple more housing questions. So last session there was bipartisan energy around measures that would make it easier and perhaps cheaper and perhaps more affordable to build new housing. So in some cases by looking at some reform type stuff. Was there anything like that coming this session that the caucus is interested in?
From our caucus's perspective, I have not heard of specific zoning reforms. I think what we feel like is missing is the actual investment in getting housing built. I think the Montana Land Use and Planning Act, which was bipartisan, passed last session, I think has provided a framework for some of those working with local governments on various zoning type reforms to promote the development of housing. I think where we're at, or at least our caucus is at, is we need to see actual investment in getting housing built.
So you mentioned, in terms of investment, you mentioned trying to get a sense for what the universe of growth is there. You mentioned that Senator Fern would like you do some more coal trust money.
Yeah.
There's also a state minimum housing tax credit bill coming. Is the caucus in position on that, the booster bill?
Yeah, so that bill passed out at House Tax with support from our caucus, and then passed the floor with, I don't know how many Democratic votes, but I would say nearly all, if not all. And so I think we view that as another important tool to get more housing built.
Other than those two, are there any bills that invest in housing in significant ways that you realize on this point?
believe the Dave Fern bill would be the most substantial investment in housing that I can think of, but I'm happy to follow up with you if something comes to me.
We also have the Governor Lisa's budget up. There's a bill yet would like to put more money in the homes program. We support that at this point.
Into the
homes,
the infrastructure program. I mean, I'd have to talk with the caucus on that, and so yeah, I'd have to get back to you. I just haven't heard much from members specifically about that.
Ask you one now. They're speaking about the caucus.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'm curious about the mobile homes bill. Have you heard from the governor's office or talked to them about whether this solves their issue with the bill?
So I've not talked to the governor's office specifically about this program. What I've connected a few residents who have been really active for years now on mobile home park reforms. I've connected them with the governor's office, and there was a meeting that I know was really productive in trying to build more understanding of where they're coming from and where the governor's office is coming from. But I've not heard from them. I mean, I hope that they would be supportive of enforcing the current law, which they seem to think is adequate. But I can also say that depending on how this bill goes, I also plan to bring other changes to the current law. A good example of that is I would like to leave the session where all residents can be guaranteed the option of a 1-year lease. It's just an example of a change to current law. But I'm starting by saying, let's try to enforce current law, and then we'll go from there.
Anyone else? Any burning questions?
Yeah, will the work of the ethics committee affect the rest of the body's ability to get different work done?
I think it's a distraction for sure. I mean, there are 4 senators that will be on that committee, and it's going to be, at least for some time, a pretty demanding exercise that they're going through. And in the end, as I said yesterday on the floor, I just want to make sure that this doesn't become a political circus. It's on the verge of that right now, in my opinion, and we need to keep focused on addressing the ethics issues, coming up with a solution that kind of addresses the infraction, so to speak.
Good to go. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Are you sure? You're okay. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.